The door slammed open. 12 men, Korea's most feared crime lords, shot to their feet, hands flying to weapons hidden beneath expensive suits. The underground chamber in Seoul's Gangnam district had seen blood. It had heard screams. But not one of the men standing in that room had ever felt what they felt in that moment, a cold, creeping paralysis that started in the chest and spread outward like frost on glass. A young black woman walked through the door alone. She wore a cream-colored linen blouse tucked into simple dark trousers. No jewelry. No bodyguards. She carried nothing except the quiet, deliberate energy of someone who had never once in her life been afraid of a room. She scanned their faces slowly, not with arrogance, but with the practiced calm of a woman cataloging information she had already memorized. Then something happened that Seoul's underworld would whisper about for years. One by one, the crime lords lowered their weapons. One by one, they bowed. 12 of the most dangerous men in Asia, men who had never bent their knees to anyone, dipped their heads low, like children caught in the presence of something ancient and absolute. One of them, a broad-shouldered man with a scar running from his left ear to his jaw, spoke in a low voice that trembled just slightly at the edges. "Welcome back, our queen." Across the city, in a glass tower that scraped the Seoul sky 40 stories above the Han River, a man named Kang Jun-woo stood at his floor-to-ceiling window and stared at the lights below. He had no idea. None at all. The woman he had been thinking about for 3 weeks straight, the quiet one from the bookstore cafe on Insadong Street, was at that very moment accepting the loyalty of the most powerful criminal network in East Asia. He was thinking about how she had laughed at something he said. A real laugh, not a polished one. He had not made someone laugh like that in years. He had no idea who she was. And that was exactly what she wanted. Kang Jun-woo had built his empire the way most men build walls, brick by brick, with suspicion as the mortar. He was 34 years old and the CEO of KW Technologies, a conglomerate whose reach stretched from Seoul to Singapore to San Francisco. Forbes had called him the coldest mind in Korean business. His competitors called him worse things. His employees, the few who lasted longer than a year, simply called him sir, and they said it carefully. He had grown up poor in Busan, the son of a fisherman who smelled of salt water and broken promises. He had watched his father work until his hands cracked and bleed, watched the company that owned the docks take everything and leave nothing. That image, his father's raw, split hands, had followed Jun-woo into every boardroom, every negotiation, every hostile takeover. It was the engine behind everything he had built. It was also the reason he did not know how to sit still without his mind sharpening itself against some new problem. His penthouse was immaculate and cold. Designed by an architect whose name appeared in international magazines, it looked like a place where no one actually lived. Because, in any meaningful sense, no one did. Jun-woo slept there. He worked there. But he had not brought a friend home in 4 years, and the last woman who had stood in his kitchen had left before dawn with the particular silence of someone who understood that warmth was not on offer. He told himself he preferred it this way. He was wrong, but he had not yet met anyone who made him see that. Amara Johnson had arrived in Seoul 11 months ago with 2 suitcases, a tourist visa, and a name that meant nothing to anyone in the city. She found a small apartment in Jongnyo-gu, a quiet neighborhood where the streets smelled like street food and old paper, and within 2 weeks she had a part-time position at a cafe that also sold second-hand books. She shelved novels. She made coffee. She smiled at customers in the careful, slightly reserved way of someone who was choosing how much of herself to reveal. Her co-workers liked her. They thought she was a graduate student, perhaps, or maybe someone recovering from something, a breakup, a bad year abroad. She spoke Korean well enough to hold a conversation and Japanese well enough to help the tourists who wandered in. She was quiet. She was kind. She tipped the delivery drivers generously. She was also, in a way that the people around her could not have articulated but occasionally felt in their bones, not entirely what she appeared to be. It was small things. The way she went still when raised voices came through the cafe door, not frightened, but alert, like an animal that had long ago decided that fear was an inefficient response to danger. The way she sometimes looked at a group of men on the street and read their formation without appearing to look at all. The way she had once, when a drunk man grabbed her wrist outside the bookshelf near the back corner, simply turned her hand in a small, precise movement and freed herself before the man even understood what had happened. Her co-worker, a bright-eyed 22-year-old named Soo-yeon, had seen it. "How did you do that?" she had whispered. Amara had smiled. "I took a self-defense class once." Once. There were other things Soo-yeon didn't see. The black luxury SUV that sometimes idled across the street from the cafe, engine running, no plates. The encrypted messages Amara read in the back office on a phone she had never shown anyone. The way, every few weeks, she would take a different route home, not because she was lost, but because she was making absolutely sure she wasn't followed. She had worked very hard to build this ordinary life. She intended to keep it. Kang Junwoo walked into the cafe on a Tuesday morning in October because his regular driver had taken a different route to avoid construction and passed Insadong Street, and Junwoo had looked out the window at the small wooden sign above the door, "Books and Brew," and made a decision that, later, he would struggle to explain even to himself. He did not usually make unexplained decisions. He ordered an Americano and sat at a corner table with his laptop, intending to spend 20 minutes before his 9 o'clock call. Amara brought his coffee. She did not recognize him, or if she did, she gave no sign of it, which he also found unusual. Every cafe in Seoul that had hosted him even once tended to produce a kind of ripple when he walked in, staff members suddenly straightening, managers appearing from back rooms. She simply set the cup down and asked if he needed anything else. "Just quiet," he said, not unkindly. "You picked the right place," she said, and walked away. He watched her go, then caught himself watching and looked back at his screen. He was still thinking about her voice when the incident happened. A man at the counter, heavy-set, loud, the kind of loud that has something to prove, was complaining about his order. Amara was behind the counter, and the man had apparently decided that her slight accent was an invitation to be cruel. "How long have you been in this country?" the man said, his voice carrying across the cafe. "Do you even understand me?" "I said oat milk. Is that a difficult concept?" The cafe went very quiet. Amara looked at the man. Not with anger. Not with humiliation. She looked at him the way an adult looks at a child throwing a tantrum, with a kind of measured patience that was, somehow, more devastating than any fury could have been. "Sir," she said, her voice perfectly level, "I understood your order correctly the first time. I also understand that you're having a bad morning. I'll remake this for you." She paused. "But the way you're speaking to me will not get you faster service. It will only make your morning worse." The man opened his mouth. Something in Amara's expression, something in the absolute absence of flinching, made him close it again. He took his cup and sat down. Soo-yeon exhaled loudly. Two customers near the window started talking again. Junwoo had not moved. He was watching her with the particular intensity of a man who had spent his entire adult life analyzing people and had just encountered something he could not immediately classify. He came back the next day. And the day after that. On the fourth visit, he stayed until the cafe was nearly empty and asked if she would have coffee with him. "Not there, somewhere else, somewhere without the counter between them." She said, "That depends on why." He had not been asked that in years. Most people wanted things from him, deals, partnerships, access, proximity to power. No one had ever responded to an invitation by asking him to justify his intentions. "Honestly," he said. "I don't know yet. I just think you're the most interesting person I've seen in a long time." She studied him for a moment. Then she said, "Okay. But I choose the place." She took him to a pojangmaka near Cheonggyecheon Stream, a small covered street stall with plastic stools and a gas heater and tteokbokki that cost 4,000 won. He arrived in a car that was worth more than the entire street. He sat on a plastic stool and ate from a paper plate and talked to her for 2 hours, and something strange happened during those 2 hours: he forgot to be guarded. They talked about books. About loneliness. About what it meant to build something in a country that wasn't yours. She spoke carefully, he noticed, never about the past, never about where she'd come from, always steering gently toward the present and the abstract. He found it interesting. He told himself it was just privacy. It was not just privacy. Weeks passed. They fell into a rhythm: walks along the river, late dinners, long conversations that felt different from any he'd had before. She made him laugh. She pushed back on his opinions in a way that was direct without being aggressive. She asked him questions about his childhood, about his father's hands, about the thing that drove him, and she listened to his answers with a focus that made him feel seen in a way that unsettled and steadied him in equal measure. He was falling for her. He knew it the way you know a season is changing, not all at once, but in accumulations, small shifts in light and temperature until one morning you look up and everything is different. What he did not know was that the world around him was quietly catching fire. KW Technologies had recently moved aggressively into the logistics infrastructure sector, acquiring port contracts along the Korean coast that intersected, in ways a civilian would never see, with the movement of certain goods by certain organizations. One of those organizations, a syndicate run by a man named Park Dae-won, who controlled half the black market pharmaceutical trade between Korea and Southeast Asia, had decided that Jun-woo needed to be reminded of his place. It started with small things. A server breach that leaked sensitive acquisition data. A key investor who suddenly and inexplicably withdrew from a deal worth $200 million. Jun-woo's security team traced the breach, found nothing. His lawyers investigated the withdrawal, found nothing. He hired outside consultants. They found nothing. Then one of his vice presidents was followed home. Then a courier carrying documents was intercepted. Then someone put a tracker on his personal vehicle. Jun-woo told himself it was corporate espionage. He hired more security. He changed his routes. He did not notice that each time something happened, the responsible parties seemed to vanish shortly afterward. A hacker whose address his security team had partially traced, gone. 2 men who had followed his VP, gone. The tracker on his car had been placed by a man named Choi something, a mid-level operative in Park Dae-won's organization. Choi something disappeared on a Thursday evening and was never found. Amara was meticulous. She had rules: no one died who did not need to, no action was taken that left a trace to her, every move was made through layers so deep that even the men carrying out her orders did not know who had given them. She had spent 8 years building a network that operated like water, shapeless, pervasive, impossible to grab. She had not wanted to use it. She had come to Seoul specifically to step away from it, to breathe, to be a woman rather than a symbol. She had told her lieutenants she was unreachable. She had meant it. But then she had met Kang Jun-woo, and something in her, something that had been asleep for a very long time, had made the foolish decision to wake up. And now Park Dae-won's men were circling the man she had sat on plastic stools with, eating spicy rice cakes and watching the lights on the water. She could not stand aside. She called in the oldest debts. She activated the network she had spent a decade building and then deliberately walked away from. She sat in her small apartment in Jongnyo-gu and made decisions that moved like earthquakes through Seoul's underworld, and then she put her phone in the drawer and went to work at the bookstore cafe and made Jun-woo his Americano and asked him how his morning was. She was very tired. She was also, for the first time in years, afraid, not of Park Dae-won, but of what would happen when Jun-woo finally saw the whole picture. He followed her because of the car. He had seen it twice before, a black SUV, no plates, idling near places she frequented. His security instincts were sharp enough that he had quietly had it noted. On a Friday night in late November, walking back from dinner, he watched the SUV pull away and watched Amara's eyes track it with an expression he had never seen on her face before, not alarm, but recognition. She knew the car. He said nothing. But when she told him she had to go home early, he did not go to his own car. He waited. He watched her walk 2 blocks, turn a corner, and get into a different vehicle entirely, a black car, sleek and expensive, nothing like the modest life she presented to the world. He followed. What he found, 40 minutes later, was a building in Mapogu that from the outside looked like a disused event space. Inside, through a security door his instincts told him should not have been left unguarded, though he didn't understand yet why it had been, almost as if someone expected him, was a room. A large room. And in the room were people he recognized. Not personally. From intelligence briefings his security chief had given him during the troubles with Park Dae-won. Crime bosses. Syndicate leaders. Men whose names appeared in Interpol files and National Intelligence Service reports. Men who ran operations across 6 countries. They were all looking at Amara. She stood at the front of the room in the same linen blouse she'd worn to dinner. She was speaking in a low voice, and the men around the table, men with scars and histories and body counts, were leaning forward to listen. Not because she had demanded it. Because she commanded it naturally, effortlessly, the way a flame commands the attention of every eye in a dark room. Then she said something Junwoo couldn't hear, and the man closest to her, the one with the scar from ear to jaw, said, "It will be done, my queen." Junwoo felt the room tilt. He backed away. He made it to his car. He sat there for a long time. She called him at 11 that night. He let it ring. She came to his building at midnight. His security let her up because he had left her on the approved list and had not thought to remove her. She knocked. He opened the door. They looked at each other for a moment. "How much did you see?" she asked. "Enough," he said. She nodded slowly. Then she said, "Can I come in?" He stepped aside. She sat on his couch and told him everything. She told it the way she did everything, steadily, without drama, without apology. She told him about her mother, a Nigerian woman who had married into one of the oldest criminal dynasties in Asia, a family that had run networks across the continent for 3 generations. She told him about growing up split between 2 worlds, the ordinary and the hidden, the visible and the real. She told him about taking control at 25, after her father was killed by rivals, because if she had not, the organization would have fractured and the power vacuum would have caused more death than she could bear. "I was a queen before I understood what that meant," she said. "I've spent 8 years trying to figure out how to stop being one." "And the cafe?" he asked. "The bookstore. All of it. Real," she said. "Every morning I worked there was real. Every conversation we had was real." She looked at him directly. "You were never a target, Junwoo. You were never a project. You were just, a man on a stool by a stream who made me feel like a person." He was quiet for a long time. "Park Dae-won," he said finally. "The attacks on my company. That was you?" "Stopping them was me," she said. "Yes." "Why?" The question sat between them, small and enormous at the same time. Amara looked at her hands for a moment. When she looked up, there was something in her face that had not been there during any of her explanations, something unguarded, something that cost her something to show. "Because for the first time in my life," she said quietly, "someone looked at me and saw a person. Not a weapon. Not a symbol. Not a queen." She paused. "Just a woman eating tteokbokki by the river." Junwoo did not speak for a very long time. When he did, he said, "I still see that woman." "I know," she said. "That's the problem. That's also the only reason I'm still here." The story of what happened next spread through Seoul's underworld in ways that surface-level Seoul would never know. Park Dae-won's organization did not dissolve, it was absorbed, systematically and without violence, into a structure so much larger than itself that resistance became simply illogical. The attacks on KW Technologies stopped overnight. The investors who had mysteriously withdrawn returned, suddenly finding their earlier concerns resolved. Junwoo never announced anything. He did not attend any meetings in underground rooms. He did not carry any weapons or make any threats. He simply, quietly, became the man who stood beside the woman the entire underworld answered to. And in that world, standing beside was more than enough. In the mornings, when she wasn't traveling, and she traveled, sometimes, to places she didn't always name, she still came to the cafe in Insadong. She made coffee. She shelved books. Soo-yun, who sensed but never confirmed that something about her coworker was very different from what it appeared, brought her soup on cold days and asked no questions. Amara was grateful for that. She was grateful, too, for the plastic stools and the paper plates and the man who had once told her he just wanted quiet, and who had somehow, in wanting nothing from her, become the person she would level empires to protect. She told him once, late at night with the city humming 40 floors below, that she had built her empire on the principle that power was the only protection. "Do you still believe that?" he asked. She thought about it honestly. "I believe power is a tool," she said at last. "I used to think it was the only one." He took her hand. Outside, in the Seoul night, in underground rooms and encrypted channels and whispered conversations between men who had spent their careers being afraid of nothing, a single name moved like a current, quiet, inevitable, absolute. What none of them knew was this: somewhere, in a country none of them were watching, a man had been making his own preparations for years. A man who had a history with Amara's family that predated her birth. A man who had been very patient, and very quiet, and who had just learned, through channels she had not yet secured, exactly where she was. He was already on a plane.